Well, no, it's called your psychiatric hospital system. It's called your mental health courts. It's called people are taken in, judged as mentally ill, and then forcibly incarcerated and forcibly drugged. And they have not committed any crime. They've been troubling to somebody, or they've showed themselves as troubled individuals. They have not expressed a desire to be helped or treated. They have not expressed a desire to be locked up and given treatment. But the state has decided that they're not responsible for their decisions, and that the best thing for them is to take away their liberty interests and force treatment upon them. I consider that a massive violation, and that's what I'm talking about. Beyond that, how many children have asked, at age 5 or 6, to be given speed, and how many children, if they did ask for cocaine, would be given it by their parents, But they're given Ritalin and they're given Adderall, and by definition, once you take one of these psychotropic drugs, your freedom of consciousness is restricted and disabled to some extent. So when you look at it that way, and you've got 12, 15 million young people on these various drugs, where their freedom of consciousness is restricted and disabled to some extent, and you've got 30, 40 or more million adults who think they have a chemical imbalance and then are taking some kind of substance which is impeding their freedom of consciousness and freedom of thought and freedom of emotion. So in that sense, if you expand liberty beyond just strictly, being locked up or not, then you go from that 1.5 million every year to, 40, 50 million, and that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, that's very depressing.
Well, we've got a crime rise. We've got families. Now, one of your concentration is in the family area. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm really interested in is kind of like you, George, with your statement. Through forgiveness, we awaken, transforming information and knowledge into wisdom. The theme of the Secret Truth Show. It's like, I'm not all that interested in the idea of poor, sick, defective, mentally ill children need drugs in order to cope with life. It's like I challenge that belief system, because that's what all of you are believing who fall into that sway and think that, your children need drugs in order to cope with life, or that you need to take a drug for the rest of your life to deal with your depression. To me, that's very, very sad. As an adult, I'm a libertarian, and pretty much, and you can choose what substances you want to put in your mouth. I think it's kind of sad if you've been snookered into believing that you have a chemical imbalance without any evidence of that. For children, I'm more of an abolitionist and a protectionist, and I don't think any child needs to be drugged into a submission or oblivion. I think that's a tragic thing. So that's kind of my view on it. But what I'm really more interested in is that, like my book, one of my books is The Wildest Colts Make the Best Horses. Spirited children make spirited adults. Transformation is possible. You can go through, extreme states of mind. You can go through depression and come back with a deeper experiences of life. You can learn from your anxiety in terms of something that's a threat and a danger to something that's important to you. You can find community and support and social synergy in a good way, in a loving way. I have a very optimistic and confident view of human nature. I'm not real optimistic and confident about social and political processes and dynamics, but basic human nature is a wonderful thing, in my opinion, and there are things we can do. A lot of my work is basically to encourage people to have more tolerance and less fear about people, having emotional outbursts, a breakdown. Like my daughter today, she had a meltdown. She was crying and raging and all this, but it was great because she just expressed it and kind of got it out, and then she was able to
experience that too.
And I have too. And then she was able to figure out what to do and how to handle the situation. And
no hypertension. No hypertension.
Well, John, you know what they tried to do? It seems like that the human condition varies so much to a great degree from from one end to the other, that they're trying to make and regiment certain behavior within some narrow vein or something. Is that? And really, human beings can vary so much.
You got it, man. It's called The Trouble with Normal. I got a lot of
Yeah, what is normal? Is that a group that's lobbying for something?
Well,
I think a little toking. That's what that is.
That's a good bumper sticker.
No, we don't say that now.
The trouble with normal, ...
Okay.
my favorite definition of a normal person is someone you don't know very well.
Yeah.
My favorite. I have a lot of YouTube videos, and if you could just YouTube search John Breeding and find my videos. But my favorite one, if you just go to YouTube and put in psychology test, are you normal? In fact, somebody was asking me about, do I do testing? Go to psychology test, are you normal, and watch my little 10-minute video. But George, you got the deal. What you're doing is you're constricting these bounds of what's considered normal. One guy that I know, with Bill Carey, he's a behavioral pediatrician in Philadelphia. He said his point of view is that most of these kids who are stigmatized and degraded, is called ADHD and drugged, are really just so-called normal variations in temperament. Like, for example,
yes.
Energy level. You've got a whole range from very, very active, high-energy, super high-energy people, to relatively low-energy, relaxed, calm sort of people.
Contemplative types.
Daydreamers.
Yeah.
And both of those ends tend to get labeled and drugged, as hyperactive or as attention deficit. And it's the same thing, whatever. It's like when somebody's 7 feet tall, that's not a pathology. That's called a tall person who might play basketball. When someone's 4'6", that's not a pathology. That's called a short person. It's the same thing with different ranges of temperament and emotional expression and eccentricity and like that. Diversity at every level, whether it's in our ecosystem or in our community of people, is a good thing.
It seems like to me that the people that are really in control are suffering in some kind of a delusional mode, where they're not fully aware of what they're actually doing. And they're being driven by money and a lot of other emotional things and power groups and so forth.
For all we know, they're on antidepressants.
But they themselves are victims themselves, I guess, too, of the very system that has generated and evolved them into whatever you want to call them, right?
Well, I think anybody whose life primarily evolves around money and power is very unfortunate, because it's not that money and power per se are bad things, but if that's the primary dynamic, that means what's not the primary dynamic is called love and empathy and community and joy and celebration, and it's kind of pathetic.
Yeah, I think so. Charlotte?
Well, no, I was just going to ask, we have some in-studio audience that would like to ask some questions. Is now a good time?
Yeah, Larry, what is your question? We've got Larry here in the studio audience. Larry, what is your question for John Breeding?
I'm going to make a short comment. I want you to comment on this, okay? A couple of years back, I had to spend some time on in the Payback Society for Debt, and I came across a cellmate who was put on Ritalin at a very young age. In fact, he said he's only around 10 years old, and he graduated through heroin and crack cocaine, marijuana later on in life.
Okay, so we've got to cut away here for a second for another break. We'll come back. Now, we'll continue that in just a second. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to The Secret Truth. I'm George Butler along with
Charlotte Littlefield, and welcome back, Dr. John Breeding.
Hello.
And are we going back to Larry?
Yeah, go back to Larry. Yeah,
for his
Larry, come on
question
back with your question, your comments
here.
there.
This missing link, I think I've discovered after about 3 or 4 years. And I wondered why Brian was put on Ritalin at such a young age, why they diagnosed him as having ADHD, and he went off the wall at 10. He started stealing from his friends and everything else, and just completely different person. He ended up in a jail cell with me, and I see a lot of people that their kids are put on ADHD, they've got some kind of troubles in that, and I wondered what the missing link was. How did they get this ADHD diagnosis in the first place? Why were they so hyper? And then just the other day, I was on the Internet, and I was researching something called excitotoxins. And Dr. Russell Blaylock, who's a neurosurgeon, is putting the link together between high fructose corn syrup, which is an excitotoxin, and monosodium glutamate, which affects the brain. And it actually destroys brain cells, and as it destroys brain cells, then moods change. And I was wondering if you would give a comment, if you have heard anything about these excitotoxins as